We are here today for CATS Connections, focus on distracted driving. This program has been put together by the Community Alliance for Teen Safety in Derry. I am here today with Howard Hedegard, who is an educator at Dartmouth Center for Injury Prevention, which is located at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center in Lebanon, New Hampshire. I'm also joined by David Campbell, who was a state representative from Nashua, New Hampshire. And we also have Bryan Reimer, who is a research scientist at AgeLab at MIT. We're going to start the discussion today by talking a little bit about distracted driving behaviors, some of the dangers that we all encounter on the road, as well as some of the implications and dangers of speaking and texting while driving. Bryan, I guess we can start with you and talk a little bit about some of the behaviors that you notice, whether yourself or somebody else on the highway, things that are going on in cars that may cause drivers to be a little bit more unfocused and perhaps put them in danger.
There's a number of things that can be considered as distractions while we're driving, and just about everything we do outside of driving can be a distraction. As a long ago AAA report pointed out, eating, drinking, changing the radio has long been considered as a potential distracting activity, as well as many of the more modern technological innovations, cell phones, text messaging, email, iPods, and the host of other pneumatic devices which people bring into cars with them. All of these devices, technologies, interactions take our attention away from the road, even if only for a brief second. At 60 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour, it doesn't take long to be in a situation where things progress to an accident, or more frequently, a near accident.
Right. David, how about you? You know, you must be on the road a lot, being a state representative. Are there certain things that are distractions to you or others in the car while you're driving?
Well, it's interesting. Actually, one of the reasons I introduced the bill to ban writing text messages while driving in New Hampshire was I observed one of my constituents came to me and said, we don't think teenagers should be able to text while driving. And would you introduce a bill to that effect? And I said, well, I'll think about it. And I was thinking, if you're going to do it for teenagers, you probably should do it for everybody. And I was convinced of that going to Concord one day on a commute, and I saw a gentleman in a Volvo, middle-aged, business suit on, typing on his laptop on the dashboard of his Volvo, driving apparently with his knees and going down the road. So at that point I said, you know, I think probably not only texting, but maybe the two-handed operation of any electronic device should also be prohibited. So that's what we did.
Absolutely. How about yourself, Howard? Have you noticed anything?
I mean, it's everywhere. I teach a defensive driving attitude course, and one of the questions that I ask to start the distracted driving segment is to ask how many of you can honestly say that you do nothing to distract you while you drive. In over 3 years, only one hand has gone up where the individual initially didn't think that they ever were distracted until they took the distracted driving quiz that we do. And the standard distractions range everything from, of course, eating, drinking, looking at something, changing clothes becomes somewhat an extreme. That happens on a regular basis. Changing the baby's diaper is something that I'm aware of. And the most bizarre that I'm aware of happened in Concord on Loudon Road a year or so ago on a Wednesday about noontime rush hour. Loudon Road is very, very congested, where this man wanted to dismantle his gun, thought his gun was empty, was wrong, shot himself, hit the vehicle beside him, and then went into the 7-Eleven parking lot and took down their signs. And after a number of months in rehab because of the injury from that, the state actually pulled his license, and rightfully so.
Wow. Well, I'm going to ask you guys a little bit about your background, and then we're going to talk on a little bit deeper level about some of these things. A lot of different experiences that have come to the table here tonight. So I'd like to delve into some issues, and I'll start with you first, Howard. I understand that the Injury Prevention Center is at the Children's Hospital at Dartmouth?
Injury Prevention Center is part of the Children's Hospital at Dartmouth. And I also, the defensive driving course that I teach, that's with another entity, New Hampshire Traffic Safety Institute, which is a National Safety Council program.
Right, and I understand, you know, the whole mission behind the Injury Prevention Center is to prevent deaths and disability due to injuries through, you know, public and professional education, something that you're probably involved in, and enactment and enforcement of appropriate legislation, and encouraging the development and distribution of proven strategies to prevent injuries. What specifically do you do on a daily basis that kind of ties into that mission?
I'm involved in a number of pieces. One is I'm with Buckle Up New Hampshire, a coalition which is a group of highway safety professionals, and it's our commitment, where the state of New Hampshire does not have an adult seatbelt law, to promote increased usage of seatbelts through education. And one of the programs we do, I was just involved this afternoon at Concord High School teaching, speaking to a group of high school driver ed students. And it's called Room to Live, causing them to really look at the benefits of wearing their seatbelts, whether there's legislation or no legislation. And I'm involved in the Teen Driver Coalition. Currently, we're looking at what's called the Graduated Driver's License, which is a progressive licensing, increasing freedoms as they go through the learning process. We're hopefully going to be able to add some restrictions to that, or some additions to that. We shouldn't call them restrictions, really, because they're designed to enhance the safety of the safe driving experience for the kids.
Right, and through programs like that, where you're already in the classroom or working with the students, do you discuss speaking on the cell phone or texting while driving as part of that conversation? Does that come up? Do they talk to you about that?
It comes up on a regular basis, and every time we have a chance, we bring it up. We went in this afternoon, for example, with the intent to talk about seatbelt usage, and we ended the day talking about distracted driving. The idea of 60 miles an hour, that's 90 feet a second. If you translate your mile per hour speed, it's 90 feet a second. That's the length of a football field in just over 3 seconds. And how long, therefore, would it take if you're texting or doing anything to distract you? How long would it take to cross that yellow line or to go off the road into the ditch? It's part of every conversation if we can possibly make it happen.
Right, and do you find that this education works? I mean, are some of these kids more familiar with the dangers of texting and speaking on the phone than maybe, say, their parents would be?
Oh, I think that anybody who does it is aware of the dangers. My experience tells me that people do it in spite of their awareness of the dangers, because they really believe it won't happen to them. And depending on how old the parent is, at least folks in my generation, I've never sent a text message at all. I suppose I know how to do it, but I don't know for sure. There's a lot of us who really haven't, and yet the younger kids are constantly doing it.
Right. And do any of the teenagers ever say, well, I understand this, you know, I get it, but I'm still going to go ahead and text on my cell phone or talk on the phone?
Sure. Constantly. And not only will they say that I will do it in spite of the danger, because they just don't believe it will happen to them. They don't believe that they will cause a crash and harm anybody else. They don't believe that they will harm themselves in any way. And that's deception, of course. We deceive ourselves into believing it. I can take a stack of newspaper stories about crashes, and many of them being distracted driving related, and I can go through the stories and share them with them and say, now, how are these people any different from you? How is what they were doing any different from what you did? And at that point, they'll start to reflect on the reality of the situation and the reality of the risk. But even with that, for example, I taught a class this past Saturday, and in the distracted driving session, I asked the question, based on what you've seen today, will you continue to drive distracted? And the majority of the folks said no, but one of the individuals says, of course I will. It's impossible to not drive distracted. And another individual said, we are just too busy. There's too much going on in our day-to-day lives. We have to.
A lot of the young people, I think,